Arrival in the sky. The transport broke through violet clouds, revealing Valendra, crystalline platforms suspended in perpetual twilight, connected by gossamer bridges that shimmered in refracted light. Tobias Renfield pressed against the viewport, his engineer's mind struggling to accept the impossible physics of cities floating in a gas giant's atmosphere. Chief Advisor Maren met him at the docking platform, grey-skinned with shifting patterns, dark eyes revealing nothing. The atmospheric processor failures threaten our existence, Maren explained as they walked through corridors that curved impossibly. If suspension fields collapse, our cities plunge into toxic depths. Nothing survives there. Tobias had expected bureaucratic delays, formal protocols. Instead, Maren led him directly to the central observatory where Sovereign Kairos Nething stood surrounded by holographic data streams. She turned, and Tobias forgot his prepared greeting. He'd expected someone ancient and ceremonial. Instead, Kairos appeared remarkably young, silver-white hair framing a face marked by exhaustion. Her opalescent skin caught light in subtle rainbows, but her violet eyes held storms, worry, fear, and profound loneliness. "Engineer Renfield," she said, her voice carrying unexpected musicality. "I'm grateful for your assistance. I'll do everything I can, Sovereign. Please, walk with me." She gestured toward the displays. "I prefer to understand the full scope." For an hour, Kairos guided him through technical failures with precision that surprised him. Unlike politicians who wanted solutions without details, she absorbed every explanation, asked incisive questions, made unexpected connections. "The cascade started here 3 weeks ago," she said, manipulating holograms. "We didn't realize how quickly it would spread." Tobias studied the data. "The synchronization protocols are degrading. The processors are forgetting how to communicate. Can it be reversed?" He met her eyes and saw genuine fear, not for power or prestige, but for her people's survival. "I think so. But it won't be easy or quick." Tension loosened in her expression, not relief, but hope. "Then we begin tomorrow." As he turned to leave, Kairos spoke softly. "One question, if you'll permit it." "Of course. Earth has oceans, yes? Vast bodies of water beneath open sky." The unexpected question caught him off guard. "Yes. I grew up near the Atlantic." "What is it like?" Hunger filled her voice. "To stand where water meets air, with nothing above but sky." Tobias thought of morning beach walks, endless horizons. Humbling. Beautiful. It makes you feel small and infinite simultaneously. Kairos nodded slowly, looking unbearably young. "I've never felt rain. Never touched water that wasn't contained and controlled. Everything here is suspension, carefully maintained. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to stand on something solid, something that doesn't depend on technology to exist." The admission felt intensely personal. Here was a woman with everything: power, prestige, an entire civilization depending on her, yet possessing nothing chosen for herself. She was as suspended as her cities, held by forces beyond her control. "Perhaps when this is over, you could visit Earth," he said gently. "See the ocean for yourself." Kairos smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps. Thank you, Engineer Renfield. Rest well." As Maren led him away, Tobias glanced back. Through transparent walls, he saw Kairos alone in the observatory, a solitary figure surrounded by dying systems, gazing at violet clouds as if they held answers to questions she'd never been allowed to ask. In his quarters overlooking the city lights, Tobias couldn't shake the image of her eyes, violet and storm-filled and unbearably lonely. In her chambers high above, Kairos stood at her window, fingers pressed against transparent walls. She'd dismissed her attendants early, needing solitude to process the unexpected comfort she'd felt sharing her confession with the human engineer. For decades she'd built walls around herself, protection necessary to lead, to make impossible decisions, to carry weight without breaking. Then Tobias had arrived with his ocean eyes and gentle competence, and she'd found herself wanting to tell him things she'd never voiced to anyone. "This is foolish," she whispered to the empty room. "He's here to fix a crisis, nothing more." But her heart, so long locked in duty's vault, stirred with something dangerously close to hope. Working in tandem. Days blurred together in diagnostic equipment and emergency repairs. Tobias expected to work with local engineers while Kairos observed from distance. Instead, she met him each morning in processor control centers, dressed in simpler robes, ready to learn. "Show me," she said. "I need to understand these readings, not just receive summaries." So Tobias taught her energy flow patterns, synchronization matrices, the delicate balance keeping Valendra's cities aloft. She absorbed everything with intensity that reminded him of his best students. By the fourth day, they worked in maintenance corridors beneath primary platforms, exposed conduits, harsh lighting, tight passages humming with barely contained power. "No sovereign has come here in 5 generations," Maren had protested. "It's beneath your station and dangerous." Kairos had simply met her advisor's gaze. "If I ask my people to risk themselves, how can I do less?" Now, deep in a junction tunnel, Kairos crouched beside Tobias as he traced a failing relay. Her ceremonial robes were streaked with lubricant and dust. She didn't seem to notice. "This coupling is corroded," Tobias said. "Probably degrading for years. We'll have to replace it, but it means shutting down this entire grid for 6 hours. Then we inform them and proceed." She pulled out her communication device. "I'll make the announcement myself." Tobias watched her compose a message, explaining necessity, offering reassurance without false promises. She carried weight directly, without delegation or buffers. They worked in companionable silence, developing an unspoken rhythm. In confined spaces, they moved around each other with increasing ease. "Tell me about your work on Earth," Kairos said, handing him a calibration wrench. "I grew up in a coastal town. When I was 12, a massive storm nearly destroyed everything. I watched engineers work for days to repair flood barriers, save the town. I knew then I wanted to keep people safe when everything falls apart." "So you're accustomed to crisis?" "I guess so. Though usually my crises don't involve floating cities." She laughed, genuine and unguarded, transforming her entire face. "I imagine this is somewhat outside your usual experience. What about you? How does one become sovereign?" Laughter faded from her eyes. "Inheritance. My parents died when I was 16, an accident in these same maintenance levels. The council wanted a regent, but I refused. I'd watched them carry leadership's burden. I became what Valendra needed. 16 is too young to carry a world. Perhaps. But who else would do it?" She paused. "I became what they needed me to be." "And what did you need?" The question hung between them. Kairos's hands stilled. "I never allowed myself to consider that," she finally said. "It felt selfish." Before Tobias could respond, the relay sparked violently. He grabbed Kairos, pulling her backward as the coupling exploded in light and heat. They hit the corridor wall together, his arms wrapped protectively around her, her face pressed against his chest. His heart hammered, partly from adrenaline, more from sudden awareness of her body against his, how her hair smelled like starlight and rain, the rapid flutter of her pulse beneath his hand. Kairos pulled back just enough to look up, violet eyes wide. They were close enough that he could see color variations in her irises, feel her breath warm on his skin. Neither moved. "Are you hurt?" he managed. "No. You." "I'm fine." But they stayed frozen, the smoking relay forgotten, both acutely aware something fundamental had shifted. Kairos's hand rested on his shoulder, trembling, not from fear, but something else entirely. She pulled away gradually, almost reluctantly. "Thank you for the quick reaction." They returned to work, but easy rhythm was gone, replaced by charged awareness making every accidental touch electric. When Kairos reached past him, he felt her arms brush like a brand. When he leaned close to explain procedures, he saw how her breathing changed. By the time they emerged into upper city twilight, Maren was waiting, disapproval evident. "The council requests an update, Sovereign." "Tomorrow," Kairos said firmly. "We've worked 12 hours. The update can wait." Maren's gaze shifted between them, seeing more than either wanted revealed. But Maren simply bowed and withdrew. "I should go," Tobias said, reluctant to leave her presence. "Yes." But Kairis didn't move. She looked at him with an expression between hope and fear, longing and restraint. "Tobias," she said, using his first name. "Thank you. Not just for today, but for treating me like a person." "Yes." The word came as a sigh. "I hadn't realized how much I missed that until you arrived." That night, Tobias couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the corridor moment, Kairis in his arms, vulnerability in her eyes, how everything else fell away until there was only her. He was falling for her. The realization should have terrified him. She was a sovereign, he was just an engineer. Their worlds were literally different. But when he closed his eyes, he saw the woman who'd gotten lubricant on ceremonial robes without complaint, who'd laughed in maintenance tunnels, who'd confessed to never feeling rain with heartbreaking hunger. In her chambers, Kairis stood at her window watching the same lights. She'd dismissed attendance early, needing solitude to process emotional chaos. She'd spent decades building walls, protection necessary to lead, to make impossible decisions, to carry weight without breaking. Then Tobias arrived with his ocean eyes and gentle competence, and those walls were crumbling faster than Valendra's processors. She wanted to touch him again. Wanted his arms around her without danger's excuse. Wanted to ask about his world, his life, everything making him who he was. Wanted things she'd never permitted herself. "This is foolish," she whispered. "He'll leave when the crisis ends. This cannot go anywhere." But her heart, so long locked away, refused to listen to reason. Breakthroughs and barriers. The crisis reached critical point on day 8. 3 more processor nodes failed overnight, creating a cascade threatening the entire southern platform. Without fundamental solutions, Valendra was running out of time. "We need to access the primary regulator in Zone 17, Tobias said, studying holographic displays where Kairis had assembled advisors. The room fell silent. Maren's expression darkened. "Zone 17 hasn't been accessed in 30 years. The atmosphere is borderline toxic, equipment unstable. It's too dangerous." "It's also our only option," Tobias countered. "The regulator controls synchronization protocols for the entire southern grid. Manual reset might stop the cascade." "Might," Maren repeated. "You're asking approval based on might." Kairis had been silent, fingers steepled beneath her chin. Now she spoke, voice calm but absolute. "I'll go with Engineer Renfield." The room erupted in protests. Maren stepped forward, hands raised. "Sovereign, that's impossible. Your safety is no more important than any of our people's," Kairis interrupted. "If I send Tobias alone and something happens, we lose both our best chance at survival and a guest under protection. I won't allow that." "Then send a security team." "A security team lacks technical knowledge to assist if complications arise." "I do not. We've worked together for over a week. I understand the systems." She turned to Tobias. "When do we leave?" 2 hours. The meeting dispersed with visible reluctance. Maren lingered, approaching Kairis with unprecedented concern. "You care for him," Maren said quietly when only 3 remained. Kairis stiffened. "I care for Valendra's survival." "That too. But you care for the human specifically. I've served your family 40 years. I know when duty drives you and when something else does." "Maren, I'm not condemning you. I'm warning you. You've spent your entire life putting Valendra first. If you allow yourself to want someone for yourself, it will complicate everything. The Council already whispers about time you spend with him. Let them whisper. When this crisis ends, those concerns will be addressed. Until then, I need to focus on keeping our cities from falling." Maren bowed and left, leaving them alone. "You don't have to come," Tobias said softly. "It is dangerous. We could wait, hope emergency protocols hold." She faced him fully. "But that's not who you are. You don't wait and hope when people are in danger. You act. And that's who you are too. Not the ceremony, that's what they made you. Underneath, you're someone who gets lubricant on robes and insists on understanding every detail. Something vulnerable flickered across her face. Sometimes I don't know where the sovereign ends and I begin. He wanted to touch her, tell her he saw exactly who she was beneath the crown. But Maren's warning echoed, you care for him, and crossing that line would change everything. 2 hours later, they descended wearing protective suits and breathing apparatus. The elevator took them through layers, past elegant upper city, through functional maintenance zones, into depths where everything grew darker and older. Zone 17 was a nightmare of corroded equipment and failing lights. The air had visible thickness, Tobias's sensors registering dangerous particulate levels. They moved through twisting corridors toward the primary regulator. The founders built this during Valendra's earliest days, Kairos said, voice distorted through apparatus. Before perfecting atmospheric processors. They had to work in these conditions constantly. They must have been desperate. Historical records say they came from a world consumed by its own star. They had months to find refuge or die. They chose these clouds because no one else would look here. She touched a wall. Sometimes I think about that desperation, that willingness to build civilization in midair rather than surrender. It helps when burden feels too heavy. The regulator chamber was vast, filled with ancient equipment. The primary regulator itself pulsed with erratic light. Worse than I thought, Tobias said. Synchronization algorithms degraded to maybe 30%. Can you fix it? I can try. But it requires manual recalibration of every network node. Hours of work. If I get the sequence wrong, it could accelerate the cascade. Then we make certain you get it right. Kairos moved beside him. Tell me what you need. They worked in focused intensity, Tobias adjusting parameters while Kairos monitored responses and calculated probabilities. Toxic atmosphere pressed around them, life support counting down available hours. 3 hours in, Tobias's hands cramped. He paused to flex fingers, and Kairos noticed immediately. Here, she said, moving behind him. Her hands found his shoulders through the suit. My teachers insisted I learn pressure points. Something about sovereigns needing to understand physical as well as abstract. The massage helped, but Tobias was overwhelmed by her closeness, the care in her touch. He turned slightly, found her face inches away, separated only by transparent apparatus sections. Kairos, he said softly. I know, she whispered. I know what I shouldn't feel. What I can't afford to want. But working here with you, just us against impossible odds. I keep thinking this is what I've been missing. Not ceremony, but partnership. Genuine connection. When this is over, you'll return to Earth. I'll return to council meetings and political alliances and every reason why this, she gestured between them, cannot happen. What if I don't want to return to Earth? Her eyes went wide behind the apparatus. Before she could respond, the regulator emitted a warning tone. They sprang apart as alarms flashed. Western node is failing, Kairos said, fingers flying. If it goes completely, it takes the entire grid. Tobias's mind raced, discarding safe choices. I need to override safety protocols and force a hard reset. It might work, or overload the entire system. Odds. 60-40. Maybe. Kairos met his gaze steadily. Do it. No fear, no hesitation. Complete trust. Tobias initiated the sequence. The regulator's hum intensified, making his bones vibrate. Energy arced between conduits. For a terrifying moment, every display showed red. Then, like a symphony finding its key, systems began synchronizing. One by one, nodes came online, chaotic signals resolving into harmony. The regulator's pulse steadied. Alarms went silent. It worked, Kairos breathed. Tobias, it worked. They watched processor efficiency climb, 40%, 50, 60. The cascade was reversing. Tobias turned to her, adrenaline and relief making him reckless. About what I said. Don't, Kairos interrupted gently. Not here. Not now. Let's return to surface, ensure repairs hold. Then. She trailed off, but her eyes held promises. The ascent felt endless and too brief. When they emerged and removed apparatus, news had spread. People lined corridors, faces bright with relief. But Maren waited at the terminus, expression grave. Sovereign, the Council has called emergency session. They wish to discuss your working relationship with Engineer Renfield. Kairos's jaw tightened. Tell them I'll attend after ensuring repairs are stable and I've rested. They were quite insistent. Then they can insist to an empty chamber. She turned to Tobias. We'll monitor systems from my observatory. This isn't over yet. Walking away, Tobias murmured, You're going to have trouble with them. I've had trouble with the Council since I was 16. They wanted a figurehead to control. They got me instead. But later, alone in her quarters, Kairos felt the weight of what was coming. The Council would demand answers, remind her of duty, of advantageous political unions, of impossibility of a sovereign choosing for herself. And she would have to decide whether partnership and genuine connection were worth fighting for against an entire civilization's expectations. Confession beneath the aurora. The processors held. For 3 days, Tobias and Kairos monitored systems, making minor adjustments, ensuring stability. The immediate crisis had passed, but both knew the real challenge was just beginning. The Council met without Kairos, an unprecedented move signaling their displeasure. Maren reported they were drafting a formal petition regarding inappropriate allocation of sovereign time and attention. They want you to remember your position, Maren said carefully. To consider political alliances that would strengthen Valendra. Kairos stood at her observatory window, watching twilight deepen. I've spent 24 years remembering my position. Perhaps it's time I considered what I want. And what do you want? She turned to face her advisor. Something real. Someone who sees me, not the crown. Maren's expression softened. Then you should tell him. Before the Council forces your hand. That evening, Kairos sent a message to Tobias. Meet me at the highest balcony. There's something you should see. When Tobias arrived, Kairos stood at the railing, silver-white hair catching faint light. Above them, the prismatic aurora was beginning. Rare magnetic fields painting the sky in cascading ribbons of color. I've seen this phenomenon dozens of times, Kairos said as he joined her. But tonight feels different. They watched in silence as waves of light danced overhead, violet bleeding into azure, emerald flowing into gold. The beauty was almost painful. I'll be leaving soon, Tobias said quietly. Now that the systems are stable. Kairos's fingers tightened on the railing. I know. Unless. Unless what? He turned to face her fully. Unless you give me a reason to stay. Kairos drew a shaky breath. I don't know how to do this. I've spent my entire life being what others needed. I ascended to leadership at 16, lost my parents, became responsible for thousands of lives. The Council wanted a figurehead, someone young and controllable. I refused to be that. But in refusing, I became something else. Something hard and distant and alone. You're not alone now. No. She met his eyes. You've made me feel things I never allowed myself. You treat me like a person, not an icon. You laugh at my jokes and explain things patiently and trust me with dangerous work. You've shown me what partnership could be. Kairos. Let me finish. She took his hand, her fingers trembling. I've envied your freedom, your ability to choose your path. But more than that, I've envied Earth itself. A world where you can feel rain and touch oceans and stand on solid ground. You asked what I want, and the truth is, I want to know what it's like to choose something for myself. To want someone not because it's politically advantageous but because they make me feel alive. Tobias's heart was racing. And do I? Make you feel alive? Yes. The word came out almost as a whisper, terrifyingly so. Above them, the aurora intensified, ribbons of light cascading in impossible patterns. Tobias reached up, gently cupping her face. "I fell for you somewhere between the maintenance corridors and the toxic depths," he said. "I kept telling myself it was impossible. You're a sovereign, I'm just an engineer. Our worlds are literally different. But none of that matters when I'm with you. You're extraordinary, Kairos. Not because of your title, but because of who you are beneath it." "What could we possibly have?" she asked, but hope flickered in her eyes. "The Council will never approve. They'll demand I choose someone who strengthens political alliances." "We could have honesty," Tobias said firmly. "Partnership. Something real instead of convenient. We could build a future together, not because duty demands it, but because we choose it." Kairos's eyes filled with tears that caught aurora light. "I've never chosen anything in my life." "Then choose now. Choose this. Choose us." The distance between them disappeared. Kairos rose slightly, closing the gap, and their lips met beneath the painted sky. The kiss was tender and desperate at once, years of loneliness meeting genuine connection, duty surrendering to desire. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. "I'm terrified," Kairos admitted, her forehead resting against his. "Me too. The Council will fight this. Let them." Tobias's arms tightened around her. "You've faced impossible odds before. We'll face these together." Kairos laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "Together. I like the sound of that." They stood wrapped in each other as the aurora reached its peak, ribbons of light cascading around them like cosmic blessing. For the first time in her life, Kairos wasn't thinking about duty or responsibility or what Valendra needed. She was thinking only about what she wanted. And what she wanted was standing right here, holding her like she was precious rather than powerful, seeing her as Kairos rather than sovereign. "Stay," she whispered against his shoulder. "Not just tonight. Stay in Valendra. Help me build something new. I'll stay as long as you want me. Then you'll be here a very long time." Below them, Valendra's cities shimmered in twilight. Above them, the aurora painted impossible dreams across the sky. And between them, something powerful and fragile and real took root, a bond that would be tested, certainly, but one neither was willing to surrender. The crisis that brought them together had passed. Now they faced a different kind of challenge, convincing an entire civilization that a sovereign could choose love without abandoning duty, that connection across worlds wasn't weakness but strength, that sometimes the most powerful choice was the one made by the heart. But standing there beneath the aurora, wrapped in each other's arms, both Kairos and Tobias felt ready to fight for what they'd found. Together. Building tomorrow. The Council's response was swift and severe. Within days of the aurora night, formal petitions circulated demanding Kairos reconsider her inappropriate attachment and fulfill her duty to Valendra through advantageous union. Tobias watched Kairos read the documents, her expression carefully neutral. They were in her private study, away from prying eyes. "They've identified 3 potential matches," she said, voice tight. "All political alliances that would strengthen trade or military defense. And what do you think? I think I've spent 24 years doing what they wanted." She set the documents aside. "I think I'm done with that. This will get ugly." "Undoubtedly." But there was steel in her voice. "Which is why we need to show them something they can't dismiss, a future where connection across worlds isn't weakness but strength." Over the following weeks, they developed a bold plan, merging Valendra's traditional atmospheric technology with Earth-based systems, creating a hybrid infrastructure more resilient than either alone. It was risky, requiring fundamental changes to centuries-old technology. But if successful, it would prove that unity across differences created something stronger. They worked tirelessly, Tobias bringing Earth engineering principles while Kairos provided deep knowledge of Valendra's unique systems. Slowly, the hybrid design took shape. Maren, surprisingly, became an ally. "I was wrong," the advisor admitted during a late planning session. "I thought you needed protection from your own feelings. But I've watched how you work together. I've seen you smile more in these weeks than in years before. Perhaps what Valendra needs isn't a sovereign who sacrifices everything, but one who understands that strength can come from connection." "Thank you, Maren," Kairos said, clearly moved. "Don't thank me yet. The Council still opposes this. You'll need to convince them publicly." The day came for the hybrid systems activation. Kairos had called a public assembly, something rarely done in Valendra's history. Thousands gathered on the grand platform, curious and concerned. Kairos stood before them, Tobias at her side. She wore full ceremonial robes, but her demeanor was different, less distant icon, more present leader. "People of Valendra," she began, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Weeks ago, we faced extinction. Our atmospheric processes were failing, our cities threatened with collapse into toxic depths. We called for help, and Earth sent engineer Tobias Renfield." She gestured to him, and murmurs rippled through the assembly. "Together, we saved our cities. But we discovered something more valuable than emergency repairs. We discovered that combining our traditional knowledge with Earth's different approaches created solutions neither could achieve alone. Today, we activate a hybrid system, Valendra technology merged with Earth engineering, that will keep our cities safer than ever before." She paused, letting that sink in. "But this isn't just about technology. It's about what we choose to become. For generations, we've isolated ourselves, maintaining traditions because they're familiar and safe. But safety through isolation is fragile. True strength comes from connection, across cultures, across stars, across the barriers that keep people apart." The council members in the front rows shifted uncomfortably. Kairos met their eyes steadily. "Some have questioned my time spent with engineer Renfield. They've suggested my duty requires different choices. And they're right that I have a duty to lead Valendra toward a future where we thrive, not merely survive. A future where we embrace new possibilities instead of clinging to old limitations." She turned to Tobias, taking his hand publicly. Gasps echoed across the platform. "I choose to formalize a bond with Tobias Renfield. Not because politics demands it, but because partnership makes us stronger. Because he's shown me that connection doesn't diminish duty, it enhances it. Because together, we can build something neither could achieve alone." The crowd erupted, some in approval, many in shock, the council in clear opposition. But Kairos raised her hand, and silence gradually returned. "I'm not asking permission. I'm showing you what I've chosen, and asking you to choose as well. Choose openness over isolation. Choose connection over tradition. Choose to build a future where Valendra doesn't just float suspended in clouds, but reaches across stars to embrace new possibilities." She nodded to Tobias, who activated the hybrid systems. Throughout the city, processors hummed to life with unprecedented efficiency. Holographic displays showed synchronization levels reaching heights never before achieved. The crowd watched in awe as their cities stabilized more solidly than in living memory. The demonstration spoke louder than any argument. Even the most resistant council members couldn't deny the evidence before them. In the weeks that followed, opposition didn't disappear, but it transformed. Debates shifted from whether to how to formalize cross-cultural bonds, how to expand Earth-Valendra cooperation, how to build on what Kairos and Tobias had started. One evening, in the privacy of Kairos's chambers, they stood together watching the city lights. "Do you regret staying?" Kairos asked softly. Tobias pulled her closer. "Not for a moment. Though I do miss Earth's oceans sometimes. Then we'll visit. I want to feel rain, remember? And I want to show you waves and sand and horizons that stretch forever." Kairos turned in his arms, her violet eyes reflecting the city's glow. "Tobias, I want to carry forward what we create together. Not just this hybrid infrastructure, but a new vision for Valendra. A place where connection matters more than protocol, where we build futures through partnership rather than isolation." "That's a beautiful vision. Will you help me build it? Not as a visiting engineer, but as my partner, my equal, someone who shares this burden and this joy." "I promise," he said, kissing her gently, "for as long as you'll have me. Then you'll be here forever." They stood together as Valendra's cities shimmered in twilight, no longer just atmospheric processes keeping civilization suspended, but symbols of what connection could achieve. Two people from different worlds had found something neither expected, a partnership powerful enough to transform not just technology, but hearts. The woman who'd never felt rain and the man who'd grown up beside oceans had built something remarkable. A future where differences weren't obstacles but opportunities, where duty and desire weren't opposites but complements, where love across stars wasn't impossible but inevitable. And as they held each other beneath Valendra's perpetual twilight, both knew this was only the beginning. Together, they would build tomorrows neither could have imagined alone. Together, they would carry forward what they'd created, not just hybrid systems, but hope itself. Together, they would prove that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or tradition, but two hearts choosing to beat as one. The end.